Baptist Boys High School, Abeokuta, has clocked 100 years, and for a lot of those who went through its famous halls of residence, the memory simply cannot be substituted for anything. It's been a story of so many highs and the occasional inevitable lows. So joining us to relive this story, as well as to take the famous school to higher places, Prof Kayode Oyesiku, President of the Old Boys Association of Baptist Boys High School, Abeokuta, BBHS as it's fondly called. We'll also try to get his views regarding contemporary issues in Nigeria. Welcome to the program. It's a pleasure having you. BBHS, I'd been to that school once, set up on that hill with a lovely scenery, produced a lot of great people in this country. I mean, what can Nigeria learn from the BBHS story of leadership?
Thank you very much for having me here, and good morning to our viewers. BBHS is a brand on its own as a school established by the Baptist Convention 98 years ago. The lessons that we can learn can be traceable simply to the journeys that we have had so far in these 98 years. Putting it very simply, three major areas that have been distinct. The first is that of leadership, and is observed. A number of the products of this school have actually held several leadership positions in all spheres of life: legal, medical, military, political, and even in the academia. Second is the concept of humility. And through the devotions that we normally had, and that I'm sure that it is still presently held, there is a sense of inculcation of humility. Third is service. Service to the community, service to the people, and service to humankind generally. The combination of actually these three make the brand of Baptist Boys High School, Abeokuta.
Well, Professor Oyesiku, it's good to have you here on the program. Well, I see you are very modest. You didn't talk about your school, saying that it is nulli secundus, second to none, and that this is a school that produced former President Olusegun Obasanjo and also Chief MKO Abiola of blessed memory, also Justice Ajibola, also Governor Gbenga Daniel, also at a time Chief Obafemi Awolowo passed through that school. But you are president of the Old Boys Association of BBHS, and that Old Boys Association, like other Old Boys Associations that we see around, has been playing a major role. Do you want to talk about this connection between schools and the role of the Alumni Association?
Thank you very much. Being modest is also part of the ethics of Baptist Boys High School, as much as you know. With respect to the issue that you raised, the Old Boys Association, Alumni Association generally, are often established to ensure that the major tenets established by the founders of the school are actually kept alive. More importantly, they are also established to ensure that the generations that we pass through can be representative of those that have actually gone through that school over the years. Simply put, in these days that the government actually is taking over the schools, using their whims and caprices, the Alumni Association are there to partner with the government to lighten the burden of the government in ensuring that services and infrastructure for the generations of the populace that are there and those that are to come actually have the best in terms of education, morally, physically, academically. Therefore, the Alumni Association are actually there to complement the efforts of the government and ensure that the students who are passing through have the best in their lives, both while they're in the school and years after.
Well, what would you say has been the greatest achievement of the school? And what would you say the next 100 years may look like?
Dr. Ruben Abati has actually answered the greatest part of that particular question. in terms of the achievement. Really, the school is second to none, nulli secundus, and a part of the impact that we have had in the society is producing leaders in all spheres of life. There is hardly any discipline, any sector that the product of the Baptist Boys High School cannot be found. It's not really now, but it has been happening over the years, and therefore making a great strides towards the development of the society in Nigeria and everywhere that we find ourselves. So far, BBHS is a brand that has had a place in the Nigerian development. And thanks to the founding fathers, the Southern Baptist Convention that established the school close to 100 years. In terms of what we aspire to the future, and that is why we have packaged the centennial anniversary. We are looking at, in the next 100 years, a different Baptist Boys High School, Abeokuta. The infrastructure over the time has decayed. The services are actually next to none. But in the last 40 years or so, the Old Boys Association, the Alumni Association, have actually come together to establish a number of infrastructure and services to ensure that those that are passing to school can replicate what have actually gone through over the years. Three major areas that we want to concentrate on is actually a complete revolution of the moral and academic standard of the school. And in this case, we are putting up some committees that can handle that. Second, we are actually rebranding the buildings and the infrastructures that are there. There are 52 structures, for instance, on the campus as of today, and 88% of those infrastructure are provided by the Old Boys. But nevertheless, with the years, an increase in the number of students passing through that particular place, there is bound to be some decadence here and there, and the decaying of the infrastructure. We want to turn that one around, particularly in the areas of physical and mental development of the school. The school, for instance, had its competitive inter-house sports almost 15 years ago. Right now, we have somewhere that it is called the field, where all is taking place, but cannot be compared with infrastructure and services that can stand as a mini sports complex. We therefore resolved to come up with a mini sports complex for it, and the foundation has actually been laid last Saturday, and we hope in the next 2 years we will complete the mini sports stadium that it is named after one of the most illustrious art products of the school, that is His Royal Majesty Oba Gbadebo, the Alaki and paramount ruler of Egbaland. We also want to equip the library and establish an ICT center that can last 21st century.
Well, Professor Oyesiku, let's take a quick commercial break, and then when we return, the conversation will continue. Quite a lot more to talk about mission schools and the education system in Nigeria. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us is Professor Kayode Oyesiku, President of the Old Boys Association of Baptist Boys High School, Abeokuta, and also former Vice Chancellor of the Tai Solarin University of Education. Well, Professor Oyesiku, it's good to have you back, but I think Rufai has the next question for you.
Okay, Rufai. Doctor. Real quickly, Prof, I want to ask you about the fight against COVID-19. And you're a development scientist and you've seen it all. Do you think we're taking the best approach as regards the fight against COVID-19? That's one. I also want you to speak to the states of our schools in Nigeria in general? I mean, yeah, you could say all those glowing things about BBHS, but if you go to BBHS today, the teaching quality is not the same like your time. Why is it that, same way? A lot of people make the argument for missionaries. Once they left, the schools were returned and all of that conversation. So why is it that, and how can we improve the schools?
Thank you very much. From the COVID perspective, the Nigerian government is not doing badly, considering the resources that it is available and the state of our health facilities. At the onset, in the first wave, the government moved very quickly to ensure that the medication process were in place. Of course, we immediately shut down, and the wave was able to be curtailed. And therefore, we had a very, very limited infection rate as well as the death rate. In actual fact, Nigeria was among the states of the world with the least infection and the death rates. Maybe as a result of the mitigation approaches that were actually put in place by then. There are arguments for and against why we don't have much infection rates. Generally, in Nigeria and in some developing countries, particularly in Africa, this is a debate for another time. The second wave came like barrages and is actually eating deep into the society. And because of the gap that has been created in the complete reorganization of the system in respect of the first wave, Nigerian people began to feel more lethargic about the whole thing. Many did not believe that it existed. Those who believed in existence just felt that it is actually just a prank on the part of the government. And as a result, they are less functional in following the protocols of the pandemic crisis. I guess a greater part of the enlightenment and, more importantly, the enforcement of the directives that has been given to mitigate the crisis may have to be put in place such that people can believe what is actually going on. And a number of facts have actually been hidden from the people. The isolation centers, many people are not aware that they actually existed. The people who are dying there are actually not shown on the televisions and all the social media, and therefore they just take it as a ruse. Anyway, I think we have more room to approach the mitigation approaches better this time around so that we can have a less infection rates and the death rates. The second perspective of the issues that you raised on the missionaries and the schools establishment and what the situation is right now, those who established schools, particularly secondary schools, in the last century have their goals and objectives that focused basically on educating the young Nigerians and to prepare them for the journey for life. They did so very well until 1976 that the federal government felt that one, it has enough money to take care of education across board, and secondly, it has the resources in terms of the management of the complex situations that is in the secondary education, and therefore took over. The journey was initially smooth for about 10 years or 12 years, and after which, that is from 1982 upwards, 83, 1984, right, we started witnessing a very, very terribly bad trend. The resources are no longer there. The acts that actually needed to be put together to ensure functionality of these schools are also not there. Mind you, the government also tried to actually have very good teachers. Public schools have very, very good teachers. However, there have been less monitoring into the activities of the teachers on the campuses. And therefore, the mission schools are just a mirror image of what they were at the point of establishment and how far they went before 1976. I believed very, very strongly it is time for the government to return those schools to their original owners and founding fathers so as to lighten the burden of the government and put us on the right path. And we can have effective monitoring of what is taking place in the secondary school. Thank you.
Well, Professor Oyesiku, good point there about the mission schools. But I mean, apart from going through one of the famous schools, you are yourself an educationist, former vice chancellor of a university. When you look back at the point where you went through the country's education system, where did we get it wrong? I mean, the education system in this country used to be very strong. We used to talk about technical education, vocational education, and parents used to send their children to their own alma mater because those were good schools. Now, where did we get it wrong? Is it the rush for oil money or the failure of leadership? And how do we get back to that glorious moment within the education system in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. You have actually touched on a very sensitive issue in the development perspective of this particular country. The time that we started getting it wrong was when the federal government and the state government, the directive to the state governments, headed by those military administrators, resolved to take over schools from the original owners who actually have a goal in developing those institutions. That was the beginning of the time that we got it wrong. Of course, the government also took over all those schools with the hindsight of the fact that we have enough money to take care of virtually everything, which was actually not sustainable. And of course, by the time things set in the early 80s, we push all these challenges, mostly negative ones, into the higher education. And it's just like a roller in the ocean, and it keeps on moving on, and it is getting worse over time. We also don't forget the fact that in mid-70s to late 70s, the federal organ also treated the bountiful knowledge of the professors who are on the campuses, right, with disdain. They send them packing, making the profession of teaching in the university to be like a servant in the kitchen, right? But when we move up to that particular period, up to the late 1980s and early 1990s, we started having many universities from the state and from the private. A lot of these universities were also established with good intentions, good missions, vision, and clear objectives of ensuring socio-political and economic development of this country. However, with time, what they did for the secondary school were also being meted to the colleges of education, the polytechnics, and the universities, right? They were hardly funded properly. They were hardly monitored as well. And that is actually a reflection of the products that are leaving the universities. One important point that we must also gather is that the structure of the Nigerian education system has not been properly followed. We are to go to 6334, where not everybody that actually must have left the lower secondary education will then move to the senior and move to the university. But that has not been the case. As you rightly hinted, the technical education aspect has actually been neglected. And that is the backbone of technological development that other countries have actually held in high esteem. Our technical education is moving towards zero level. The government has technical colleges, but they are shadow of themselves today. They are highly developed, they are highly provided for in terms of infrastructure, services, and equipments. And this also translated to what happens. Actually, the federal government, through the TED Fund, attempted to have an intervention. And in the past 12 years, or in the past 10 years or so, they have done wonderfully well through TED Fund. Many of these universities has been equipped technically, but a number of the knowledge that it is gained at the university level must actually supposed to have started from the secondary level. So we must actually move down at the lower level of the secondary school by providing equipment for technical education and technical knowledge. Finally, in the last 5 or 6 years, there have been changes in the curricula of the secondary school. There have been some funny subjects and courses that have been introduced that has little relevance to the development of this particular country. And those subject matters that you and I know have actually been a foundation of the development of a good nation, of a good country, has actually been sidelined. You can imagine for several years, history was taken out of, and people hardly know where they come from. The same thing is geography. They also taking it off from the syllabus, in the secondary school level examination. People don't know, people live in Lagos, but they don't know the capital of Lagos. People live in Nigeria, they don't know Abuja is the capital of, and it goes on and on, and on and on and on. And this actually weakens the other basic sciences and social sciences of the courses that are in the secondary school. And it's translated to the university level. And I hope with the nature of the composition of the team in the NUC in the recent past, things looks as if to say they're on the right path to bring us back to where we're supposed to be.
Well, seems you're not truly, totally optimistic there. But let me ask you about a tiny issue in the tertiary education, the recurring industrial action, the impact of that on the education system as a whole, and the turnout in general. What are your thoughts? Can we buck the trend anytime soon? Briefly, sir.
Well, the Academic Staff Union of University ASU, to which I'm a member, and to which I believe in very, very strongly, is not capable and culpable to be blamed in the recurrent crisis. We have agreement with the federal government, there are agreements with the state government, but the government just remain on their own part of the agreement. And this is very, very unfair on the system. If you look at the major factors why the strike had to actually take place, it's not unconnected with providing.
Well, Prof, sorry to interrupt you. We need to take another short break. When we return, the conversation with you will continue. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us is Professor Kayode Oyesiku, former Vice Chancellor of the Tai Solarin University of Education and President of the Baptist Boys High School, Abeokuta Old Boys Association. Thank you for staying with us, Professor Oyesiku. By the way, I see that your cap, green and gold. That's the BBHS Old Boys cap. But Rufai is waiting for you here to ask you the next question.
Before the break, you were making a point on the incessant industrial action and what ASU can do. ASU.
Yeah, thank you very much. As I was saying, the government representatives through Ministry of Labor, Federal Ministry of Education, and all others actually are the ones who jettison the outcome of the so many agreements that have been made with the union. Before this last strike, it took almost another 10 years or so before we embark on this kind of the long and short of it is that the government should be alive to its responsibility. It has a very, very great impact in every aspect of life of education in this country. The students, right, who are actually delayed to graduate, the academic staff themselves. By the time you develop a chronology of the services that you have had over time in the university system, and you try to apply outside the country, perhaps for sabbatical leave, people try to answer you questions. What are you doing for almost a year or so without working? So we are equally affected. It is actually a lose-lose game for everyone, negatively affecting the system and the development of our youth.
All right, that's a good place to rest it. We'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Professor Oyesiku, for your time this morning. Thank you so much.